Welcome to Cowboy Story Trails, where the spirit of the Old West lives on through stories of grit, heart, and the kind of changes that only come from taking a chance. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join the trail with us. Today we've got a true heart-tugger. The story of a lonesome rancher who tacked up a simple notice for a cook, never expecting a widowed woman and her 2 kids to ride in and turn his whole world around. Picture this. It's the late spring of 1889 in the high plains of eastern Wyoming. The grass is greening up after a hard winter, the winds carrying the scent of sagebrush, and the sky stretches so wide it makes a man feel small. Elias Thorne owns the Double Bar Ranch, a spread of about 5,000 acres running longhorn cattle and a few horses. Elias is 38, built like an oak, with hands calloused from rope and reins, a thick mustache gone a little gray at the edges, and eyes that don't give much away. His wife, Mary, passed 4 years back from a fever that swept through like a prairie fire. She left him no children, just an empty house and a kitchen that hadn't seen a proper meal in years. The ranch hands, 12 of them, mostly young drifters and a couple of old-timers, were good with cattle but hopeless in the cook shack. Breakfast was usually burnt coffee and biscuits hard enough to break a tooth. Supper was beans boiled to mush or steak fried till it curled like boot leather. The men grumbled, but they stayed because Elias paid fair and treated them square. Still, Elias knew something had to give. One morning he saddled his buckskin gelding, rode the 12 miles into the little town of Sagebrush Flats, and stepped into the general store. He pulled a scrap of paper from his vest pocket, inked out a notice in block letters, and asked old Mr. Harlan behind the counter to tack it up. The notice read plain and simple: wanted. Ranch cook. Double Bar Ranch. Must feed 12 hungry men 3 squares a day. Good wages, room and board, no questions asked. Apply to Elias Thorne. Elias didn't linger. He bought a sack of flour and some tobacco, then headed back to the ranch. He figured maybe some old chuck line rider or a down-on-his-luck miner would answer. He never figured on a woman. A week later, dust boiled up on the horizon just after noon. A battered wagon pulled by 2 mismatched horses rolled up the long lane to the ranch house. Elias was out by the corral, doctoring a horse's hoof, when he heard the creak of wheels. He straightened up, wiped his hands on his chaps, and walked over. A woman climbed down from the wagon seat. She was in her early 30s, brown hair pulled back under a plain sunbonnet, wearing a faded calico dress and a shawl against the wind. 2 children followed her down, a boy about 9, skinny with freckles and a mop of red hair, and a girl maybe 6, clutching a rag doll and hiding half behind her mother's skirt. The woman met Elias's eyes straight on. "Mr. Thorne, I'm Abigail Carter. I saw your notice in Sagebrush Flats. I'm here to apply for the cook's job." Elias blinked. He took off his hat out of habit. "Ma'am, I reckon I was expecting a man. Ranch cooking's rough work. Long hours, no days off, and 12 men who eat like locusts." Abigail didn't flinch. "I've fed bigger crews than that. My husband was trail boss on the Chisholm for 6 years before he got thrown and trampled last spring. I cooked for 40 hands on the trail more than once. I can handle it." The boy stepped forward. "I'm Tommy. I can peel potatoes and carry wood. My sister Lily can set table and dry dishes." Elias looked from the woman to the kids and back. The house had been silent too long. The bunkhouse smelled like old socks and grease. He rubbed the back of his neck. "Tell you what, I'll give you a week's trial. If the boys complain, you're out. If they don't, you're hired. Deal?" Abigail nodded. "Deal." They unloaded the wagon. 2 small trunks, a crate of kitchen things, a couple of quilts. Elias showed them to the small room off the kitchen that had been Mary's sewing room. It was dusty, but it had a window that looked out over the prairie. Abigail set to work right away. That evening, She built up the fire in the big cast iron stove, rolled out biscuit dough with a bottle she found, fried up steaks, boiled potatoes with onions, and baked a couple of dried apple pies. The smell drifted out to the bunkhouse and pulled the men in early. When they filed in, hats off, they froze in the doorway. A clean tablecloth, plates set proper, coffee steaming in tin cups, and food that smelled like heaven. One cowboy, a tall kid named Rusty, whispered, "Lord have mercy." They sat, they ate, they groaned with pleasure. Biscuits disappeared in 2 bites. Gravy got mopped up with crusts. When the pie came out, still warm, there wasn't a word, just the scrape of forks and the occasional, "Ma'am, you're a saint." Elias ate at the end of the table, watching. He saw Tommy carrying plates, Lily pouring coffee careful like. He saw Abigail moving between stove and table like she'd done it 1,000 times. For the first time in years, the ranch house felt alive. The week passed quick. The men didn't just eat. They talked. They laughed. They told stories. They even cleaned their plates instead of tossing them in the wreck pan. On the 7th day, Rusty spoke up at supper. "Boss, if you let her go, we're all quittin'." The others nodded. Elias looked at Abigail across the table. "You're hired. Permanent." Abigail smiled, small and tired but real. "Thank you, Mr. Thorne. Call me Elias." The days turned to weeks, weeks to months. Abigail brought order. The kitchen shone. She taught Tommy to chop kindling and Lily to churn butter. The kids ran wild on the prairie, chasing calves, learning to ride on old gentle ponies Elias loaned them. The ranch hands started washing up before meals, shaving on Sundays. They even patched the porch roof without being asked. Elias noticed things. The way Abigail hummed old hymns while kneading dough. The way she stood on the porch at dusk, watching the sun drop, her face soft. The way the kids called him, Mr. Elias, now, and he didn't mind. He started coming to the house more. After supper, instead of heading to the barn, he'd sit on the porch with Abigail. They'd talk about nothing and everything. She told him about her husband, how he'd loved the trail but hated leaving her behind. Elias told her about Mary, how she'd wanted children but the fever took her before they could try again. One evening in late fall, the sky turned gold and the wind carried a chill. They were sitting side by side, rocking in the old chairs. Elias cleared his throat. "Abigail, you've brought something back to this place I thought was gone for good." Laughter. Warmth. Hope. She looked at him. "You've given us a home, Elias. A real one." He reached over, took her hand. It was rough from work, but warm. "I don't want you to leave. Ever." She squeezed his hand. "Then I won't." Winter came hard that year. Blizzards piled snow against the house. Cattle drifted, and Elias and the men rode out every day to push them back. One night Elias came in half frozen, ice in his mustache. Abigail had hot stew waiting, coffee strong enough to wake the dead. She wrapped him in a quilt, rubbed feeling back into his hands. That night, by the fire, he asked her to marry him. Simple, no fancy words. Just, "I love you, Abigail. Marry me." She said yes through tears. Come spring, they rode into Sagebrush Flats to the Little White Church. The whole crew came, cleaned up and wearing their best shirts. Tommy stood proud as best boy. Lily scattered wildflowers. The preacher spoke of new beginnings. When Elias kissed Abigail, the cowboys whooped and tossed hats in the air. The ranch changed after that. It grew. More cattle. A bigger garden Abigail planted. 2 more children came along, a boy and a girl, who filled the house with running feet and laughter. Tommy learned to rope. Lily played piano on an old upright Elias bought. The double bar became known far and wide, not just for good beef, but for good food and a family that worked together. Years later, when folks asked Elias how he turned things around, he'd just smile and say, "I put up a notice for a cook." A widow answered. And everything changed. And that's the way it was on the Double Bar Ranch. Thanks for riding along with us on Cowboy Story Trails. If this story warmed your heart, give it a like, drop a comment telling me your favorite part, share it with someone who needs a little hope, and subscribe so you never miss the next trail tale. Until next time, keep the fire burning and the coffee hot. God bless.